Dear participants here at the Orange Cafe, dear participants online, a very warm welcome to our interactive high-level dialogue on accelerating the ending of female genital mutilation and gender-based violence. This event is part of a continuous movement building that we together can take to end these phenomena. My name is Anna Holmström and I'm the Deputy Representative at UNFPA in Zambia. On a personal level, today is very close to my heart. I've spent the last 15 years, especially in Tanzania, working to end female genital mutilation and gender-based violence as a support to a very committed feminist movement. As a global movement, we've made so much progress. As a global movement, we have faced so many challenges. And today, we are asking our panelists, what are the key factors that enable an acceleration? And we are here to hear stories about Ubuntu, about the spirit of humanity to each other. I would like to thank our speakers today, first of all, for being here today, but most of all, for your dedicated service. I will introduce all the speakers one by one during the panel discussion. But before that, we have an opening session and prepared remarks from our invited guests. And I would like to first of all introduce His Excellency Umaru Ganu, who is the permanent representative of Burkina Faso to the United Nations. Before this role, it is worth noting that, for example, between 2018 and 2019, he was the Director General at the Ministry of African Integration, among many other significant roles that have all been really focused on promoting regional integration and on working together as one Africa. In the same spirit, the African Union champion role of Burkina Faso really encompasses the spirit of working together to end FGM. Burkina Faso hosted the first ever international conference to end FGM. And it wasn't just a conference, it really cemented collaboration. It led to a cross-border declaration that is now overseeing the collaboration between countries including Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, and Somalia. And in my old home country, Tanzania, for example, now the police across the border between Kenya and Tanzania, where before they were focusing on issues of cross-border cattle theft, they are now collaborating on managing FGM cases that cross the borders. And with us today, we also have Florence, who's the chair of Child Helplines in Africa, and she has overseen an all-Africa communique of child helplines working together to end FGM and child marriage. So if a child is taken across the border, you can still call 116, regardless of which side of the country you are. And thank you, Burkina Faso, for ensuring this integrated approach to ending FGM, and welcome, Your Excellency, to make your remarks.
Merci, Madame de la parole. Madame la directrice exécutive, distinguées personnalités, Mesdames et Messieurs, je voudrais tout d'abord féliciter la directrice exécutive de l'UNFPA, la docteure Nathalie Kanem, pour l'organisation de ce panel de haut niveau qui vise à échanger sur les défis critiques et les innovations pour mettre fin à la violence à l'égard des femmes et des filles et aux mutilations génitales féminines.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Madam the Executive Director of UNFPA, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, participants to this high-level interactive dialogue on shared vision to end. Sorry, the microphone. So, Madam the Executive Director of UNFPA, distinguished guests, honorable participants. So it's an honor for me to take part in this high-level interactive dialogue on shared vision to end gender-based violence and female genital mutilations.
J'adresse également mes vives félicitations et salutations à tous les panélistes pour leur disponibilité et leur engagement en faveur de cette noble cause.
So I would like to thank all distinguished panelists for their commitment for this, taking part in this noble initiative, this noble cause.
Mesdames et messieurs, au Burkina Faso, les violences à l'égard des femmes et des filles et les MGF sont soutenues par le poids des us et des communes et des coutumes, des traditions et la mauvaise interprétation des textes religieux.
Ladies and gentlemen, in Burkina Faso, the female genital mutilation and violence, gender-based violence, and violence toward girls and women, generally speaking, are exacerbated and by traditions, by religious beliefs.
Ceci entraîne une marginalisation de la femme et sa relégation au second plan, l'empêchant ainsi de bénéficier des mêmes opportunités que les hommes et de participer efficacement au développement économique et social.
This leads to a marginalization of women and being relegated to the second level, second layer of life, preventing them to fully participate and fully get opportunities beside men, their counterparts, in full contribution to the development.
Grâce aux efforts conjugués de l'ensemble des acteurs, nous avons pu aboutir à quelques résultats très probants que je vais essayer de lister, mais pas tous.
Thanks to the combined efforts by various partners, both social, economic, political level, this led to many achievements that I will mention some. I cannot mention all of them here.
L'engagement et la volonté politique dans la lutte contre les mutilations génitales féminines, avec la création depuis 1990 d'un Conseil national de lutte contre la pratique de l'excision.
The commitment and the political will to combat female genital mutilations have brought about creation of the National Council, the Conseil national de lutte contre la pratique de l'excision. It's a national committee combating the practice of FGM on all its forms. This entity was created in 1990.
L'élaboration et la mise en œuvre de 5 plans quinquennaux, dont le dernier en date est pour la période 2022-2026.
Development and implementation of 5-year plans to fight against FGM, and the latest one is MGF 2022-2026.
L'adoption et l'application de lois permettant de réprimer les violences à l'égard des femmes et des filles ainsi que des MGF.
Adoption and enforcement of legislation on the criminal code that will strengthen any legislation and any repressive measures against those practicing FGM.
Et l'institution d'un numéro vert pour des appels gratuits et anonymes afin de dénoncer les cas ou les tentatives d'excision et de violence.
Toll-free hotline was also established to denounce any person practicing FGM and any violence against women and girls.
Et tous ces acquis ont été possibles par des innovations apportées par le gouvernement, parmi lesquelles on peut citer
All these were possible through innovation brought about by the government of Burkina Faso, among which we can mention a few.
la mise en œuvre de l'approche Nexus MGF qui consiste à tenir compte des MGF dans la riposte contre l'insécurité et la planification des actions humanitaires.
The implementation of the Nexus FGM approach, which consists in taking into account FGM in the response against insecurity and actions to be planned at humanitarian level as to repress any perpetrator of these harmful practices.
l'implication des victimes dans les actions de promotion et de l'élimination des violences à l'égard des femmes et des filles et des MGF.
Also, actions that involve the victims, survivors of all these FGM practices, as well as violence against women and girls.
L'autonomisation des victimes par des formations et l'accompagnement en activités génératrices de revenus.
Empowerment of victims and survivors through training activities, support in income generating activities, and any activities for their welfare socially and economically.
Le développement d'une coopération judiciaire avec la Côte d'Ivoire en vue de renforcer la lutte contre la pratique transfrontalière.
Developing a legal and judicial cooperation with the border country of la Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, so as to strengthen the fight against cross-border FGM practice.
Le développement d'une stratégie endogène pour la poursuite des actions de lutte contre ces violences dans les zones à défis sécuritaires et humanitaires.
And developing a strategy and an indigenous strategy involving the local population so as to continue actions against violence and FGM practices, mostly in the security affected areas and humanitarian areas, mostly in the rural area and the northern part of the country.
La construction de centres holistiques de prise en charge des dites violences dans les régions pour favoriser l'accès des victimes à des prises en charge de qualité.
Construction of center of reference, holistic centers that are providing support, training to the victims and survivors of these practices.
Nous avons 13 régions au Burkina, donc dans ces régions, cela permet de rapprocher les bénéficiaires de ces centres-là.
So we have 13 different regions in the country in Burkina Faso, so we have centers in those regions so as to bring beneficiaries closer to these centers.
Et la célébration de la Journée nationale de lutte contre la pratique de l'excision le 18 mai de chaque année.
So we also establish every 18 May of every year the celebration of the National Day against FGM practices.
Cependant, malgré ces efforts consentis, les défis restent énormes et sont principalement, je vais citer quelques-uns des défis.
However, we still have challenges, among others.
La lutte contre la clandestinité, la pratique transfrontalière et la mobilité des exciseuses et des exciseurs.
We have clandestinity, we have cross-border practice of FGM, which are challenges, among the challenges.
Le contexte sécuritaire et humanitaire difficile également constitue un défi.
And the complex security and humanitarian situation makes this fight more difficult.
L'appropriation de la lutte contre ces violences par les collectivités territoriales.
Ownership of this fight against FGM by the local governments is a challenge.
Et l'accès des victimes aux services de protection et de prise en charge.
Access of victims to the social protection services as well as care.
La mobilisation des ressources financières suffisantes.
Mobilization of sufficient financial means.
Et la résistance au changement face aux normes sociales relatives aux inégalités de genre.
And resistance or reluctancy from some part of the population towards the change of behavior towards these practices.
Je voudrais m'arrêter à cela, mais avant de conclure,
I would like to stop, but before that, let me conclude by saying,
je voudrais renouveler ma gratitude à l'UNFPA,
thank you to UNFPA,
dont l'accompagnement constant a permis d'atteindre des résultats fort appréciables.
Their consistent support have enabled us to reach many achievements.
Je voudrais également réaffirmer l'engagement des autorités de la transition
And allow me to reaffirm the commitment of the government of transition au Burkina Faso,
à poursuivre les efforts visant à mettre fin aux mutilations génitales féminines et aux violences à l'égard des femmes et des filles.
to carry on with any efforts, any actions to end FGM and any harmful behavior. Thank you.
Your Excellency, we thank you immensely for that confirmation of your continued commitment to ensuring the integrated, collaborative, One Africa approach to ending FGM. Thank you very much. This is to recognize both the arrival of Honorable Minister Doreen Mamba, but to also recognize the presence of the Gender Minister of Chad, Madame Amina. Dear participants, the next guest is from an institution that really knows no borders in its work to end FGM and gender-based violence. Your Excellency, Archbishop Gabriele Caccia, Apostolic Nuncio, Permanent Observer of the Holy See to the United Nations, is our next speaker. His Excellency joined the diplomatic service of the Holy See in 1991, and he has served in Tanzania and Philippines, among many other countries. But I mention these two because we have speakers from these two countries here today. Roman Catholic Church is a significant provider of services and of prevention and response efforts in ending FGM and child marriage and gender-based violence. One example is the work of Sister Germaine, who will be speaking in our panel later today. We really want to thank you for all the work that you're doing around the world, and we welcome Your Excellency for you to make your remarks.
Thank you very much for this kind invitation, and of course you will listen to speakers who are working on the ground. I'm working a little bit far from the ground, but it's important, okay, that the title we have chosen, Shared Vision. We had not a shared language before, but we could understand each other. There is always a way out if we want to know each other, respect each other, talk to each other. So this is exactly what we are trying to do here in this place with your activities and in many countries where people are directly involved. We want to reach a shared vision, even if we start from different point of view. And it's very important that this shared vision could have some point of focus. And the focus is the dignity of the human being, each human person. I believe that in all cultures, I've traveled a little bit around the world before coming at the United Nations. In each culture, in each faith, there is this deep feeling of the dignity of the human person. And on that perception, we can build together, have a shared vision, and also learn how to change what should be changed without making this change more violent, because we are against violence anywhere. And if we think we change with violence, we are just increasing violence. So we have to change the approach so that there will be peace, but with a shared vision. And this is the most important goal we have to achieve. In this sense, I will just stress two simple things. First of all, as a Catholic Church, we believe that God created human being, men and women, with the same dignity. So we are fundamentally equal. This is the basis. And when there are episodes or cultures or traditions that implement violence against women, we can say that's not the vision of God. It's not what is His plan. This is something wrong, not just on the human level, but also on a spiritual level. And we are called to change our mentality. Just to make clear that as a Catholic Church, wherever we are, in Africa, in Asia, in Europe, in America, wherever, we don't accept violence and violence against women. That should be clear. And I just want to quote Pope Francis at the beginning of this year. He said in one homily, how much violence is directed against women? Enough to hurt a woman is to insult God, who from a woman took on our humanity, by the way, in her belief. So this is something very, very, very clear. And we build on this vision a lot of consequences, because when you believe something, you act in this way. And if you know some institutions, some schools, hospitals, everywhere in the world where you are, and you see what the Catholics are doing, you should see they are implementing this vision. If not, tell them, I authorize you, tell them you are not doing what you are supposed to do, and you have to change. And we have just listened also some initiative at the state level. Each one has his own responsibility. A teacher as a teacher, a student as a student, a minister as a minister. Each one has this responsibility and should act according to that vision. They're telling me that they're going beyond the time, so I summarize. But the second point is more specific about these female genital mutilations. Of course, in coherence with what we have said before, from a Catholic perspective, every person is a gift, and that includes our bodies, which should be respected. And Pope Francis has described FGM as a scourge of humanity, which demeans women and girls and gravely undermines their physical integrity. It also has serious health risks, due both to the conditions in which it is often carried out and to its long-term health effects. Meanwhile, it has no health benefits. Under no circumstances could such a procedure be considered ethical, even less when justified by flawed ideas about the role of women in society. That's why we religious leaders have a great responsibility, because religious is a part of and not apart from community. And our responsibility is to make clear that we bring into our action and our conviction this principle. Of course, we are proposing, not imposing. That's make space also for those who think differently to make a journey together. We want a shared vision, not another imposition. And this is more difficult, even at the United Nations. Sometimes we see that there are blocs trying to impose their own vision. But we have to learn the way of dialogue when we come to a shared vision. And as I said at the beginning, this is very, very much possible if we put the human dignity of each person at the core of our vision and our action. And if you do that, we'll be sure that the Catholic Church is also there, ready to support and work together. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the beautiful words, and the suitability of those words to today did not go missed. I have some big news to share in a time period where we've been hearing a lot of bad news. There is also some good news. In December 2023, the Republic of Zambia revised the Law of Marriage Act. And as of the 26th of December 2023, the minimum age of marriage in Zambia for both statutory and customary marriages is 18. This was made possible by the Children's Code Act of 2022, and one of the ministers with the most substantial part in ensuring that that law was pushed through is here with us today. And I have the honor of welcoming Honorable Doreen Mwamba, the Minister of Community Development and Social Services, to the stage.
Good afternoon. I'm indeed delighted to be with you this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished invited guests, I am delighted to be part of this high-level interactive dialogue aimed at sharing the vision of ending gender-based violence and female genital mutilation. The legal and policy framework plays a critical role in fighting gender-based violence by establishing a foundation of prevention, intervention, and protection. And I want to share with you that I'm also a survivor of gender-based violence. We cannot begin discussing financing before discussing the legal and policy framework. The legal and policy framework is key in establishing penalties and stipulates the rights of gender-based violence survivors, including access to justice, protection, and support services. Laws help us to define different forms of gender-based violence as crimes, setting clear boundaries and deterring potential perpetrators. Distinguished guests, Zambia has made significant strides in establishing a legal and policy framework to combat gender-based violence and child forced marriages. The Constitution of Zambia in 2016 recognizes equality between men and women, and promotes society that recognizes human dignity, non-discrimination, and gender justice. The Anti-Gender-Based Violence Act, number 1 of 2011, is a landmark law prohibiting various forms of gender-based violence, including physical violence, sexual violence, emotional violence, and economic abuse. The Penal Code, Act number 1 of 2012, strengthens penalties for sexual offenders and defilement. Distinguished guests, the recently passed Marriage Amendment Act of 2023 marks a significant setting of the law minimum legal age of marriage as 18 for both girls and our boys. Previously, parental consent allowed marriage between 16 and 18, and customary marriages had no age. It had no age restriction. This is a landmark piece of legislation in the fight against gender-based violence and child early forced marriages. Distinguished guests, the Marriage Act of 2023 is a tremendous milestone for Zambia as it aligns the provision of Children's Code Act, the Code Act number 12 of 2022, as well as the Education Act of 2011, which prohibits child marriage and marrying off a learner, respectively. Distinguished guests, Zambia is resolute in ensuring that adequate legal provisions are in place to create an enabling environment to protect our children, especially our poor children, from child forced marriages. Distinguished guests, let me hasten to state that laws are only effective if properly enforced, supported with adequate human and financial resources within the broad framework of a transparent judicial system. Further, I wish to mention that laws will face resistance from deeply ingrained cultural norms that perpetuate or even condone gender-based violence. Social change efforts are needed alongside frameworks if we are to achieve the desired results. The fight to end early forced child marriages cannot be achieved without signages of key actors that seek to address the drivers of these child marriages. Withstanding the global threats, that worsen the vulnerabilities that contribute to the occurrence of child marriage. Proactive, deliberate measures should be prioritized. Therefore, I wish to call for continued partnership and commitments to eliminate gender-based violence, child forced marriages, and female genital mutilation. I thank you for your kind attention.
Honorable Doreen, thank you again for all your work in ensuring this historic milestone in Zambia, which we believe will also inspire neighboring countries where the journey is still in progress for law change. Dear participants, it is now my honor to invite Dr. Natalia Kanem, who is the United Nations Under Secretary General, and she is our Executive Director here at UNFPA. As many of you know, she has dedicated her entire career to this work, advocacy, research, and more. I personally remember with great fondness the years that I served with Natalia in Tanzania. I've missed you, Dada. Karibu sana.
Thank you, dear Anna. Honorable Minister, Your Excellency, the Apostolic Nuncio, Your Excellency, the Permanent Representative of Burkina Faso. Thank you so much for gracing us with your wisdom. Esteemed partners, dear friends, dear young people, I greet you in peace, which, after all, is the noble purpose of the United Nations, and it is the wish of every woman, every girl that UNFPA serves all around the world. And that peace, that ability to live free from fear, free from harm, continues to elude women and girls, sadly, in every part of our world. I remember a woman called Marion, who was forced to undergo female genital mutilation, FGM. And this at the age of 14, even though her father had opposed the practice. In her tradition, it would have been done earlier. Yet, once he passed away, there was no one to protect her, to shield her from that fate. And that trauma for her has been long-lasting. When she was pregnant and delivered her first child, she suffered 3 days of excruciating labor pain and said that she would not wish such suffering on anyone, not even my worst enemy. She vowed that her own daughter will never have to endure what she did, and she speaks up and she speaks out to protect human dignity. And that's what we all need to do, as we're doing today, to speak up and to speak out. Because it is true that each and every day, 2,000 girls undergo female genital mutilation. And an estimated 4.4 million girls every year newly become at risk. Other forms of gender-based violence and harmful practices continue to be rampant. And I always say that if this practice is as old as the days of the caveman, if it's as old as the days of Methuselah, this is the generation that will change that practice. Child marriage is one of them, and at least 650 million girls and women alive today were married during their childhood, robbing them of achieving their full potential. And overall, estimates, and we know that these are underestimates because of stigma and shame, 1 in 3 women will experience violence at some point during her lifetime. So this risk, the risk of GBV, the risk of FGM, the risk of harmful practices, only worsens when we have conflict, when we have war, when we have humanitarian disaster, even if it's famine or flood, cyclone, climate related. Families come under increasing pressure. They come under increasing economic and social stress. And when you have record levels of displacement and hardship and humanitarian need, desperation can lead people to marry off their child or to subject them to harmful practices. So at UNFPA, as many of you know, we have defined a zero. And we say zero, right, to all forms of violence and harmful practices against women and girls, being committed to work closely with governments and with civil society and with religious leaders, with traditional chiefs, with whichever allies are going to help women and girls get to zero. And here I will say that promoting positive masculinities and directly engaging men and boys is part of making them essential partners to end these practices, many of which are designed to make girls marriageable. So men have a leading role to play. Your leadership has a leading role to play to counter these social and cultural norms that would perpetuate these human rights violations. Together already, I think we've done a lot, but we're talking about zero violence in the home, zero violence in our communities, an end to marrying girls before the age of 18, and an end to FGM with all of its physical but also mental ramifications and scars. 30 years after global leaders came together at the International Conference on Population and Development in Cairo, UNFPA can say we've seen significant gains in women's rights and empowerment in the over 130 developing countries where we serve. Yet, for those who've been excluded from those gains, the pain is real when you're excluded from this type of progress. So that's why UNFPA is hard at work, providing the research, providing the changes to health systems, the shelters, the counseling, the hotlines, and the summer camps, many of which are actually led by religious communities that would shield women, and in this case girls, from GBV, up to and including technology-facilitated GBV. Girls need to be safe online and to be free from fear of being insulted and stigmatized and shamed. Technology should be our friend, and it should be put to positive ends. So I hope that when you leave this room, that your actions are going to spell the difference in communicating what you know about protecting girls and dismantling FGM. And this is going to bring better health to the girls and much more happiness to their families. So we pledge to work together with you to plant those seeds of peace, to do the faithful work that we need to do to transform societies, for these changes to take root, and for women and girls to live confidently in peace, in freedom, and in full equality. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you, Anna, for coordinating.
Thank you, Natalia, and thank you for all the speakers in our opening session. I would like to request that we take a photo. If you could all stand in front of the circular tables here. And then after that, I would like to request that you take a seat in that table where the speakers then, for the next sessions, will move to the front.
On the base, right? Yeah. Thank you.
All right, if you can please look into me for a second.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Dear participants, I was sincerely gutted that the next speaker cannot be here in person. She is in DRC, but she is able to join us online. She's our only online speaker. She is the mother of a movement to end FGM in Tarime district in Mara region of Tanzania. She is a nun of the Order of Daughters of Charity, working with the Episcopal Conference of Tanzania. She's now working with JAD Africa, which is Youth in Action for Sustainable Development in DRC. So she's currently actually working to support prisoners in the DRC. But while she was in Tanzania, for 10 years she worked to end FGM. She received the National Award from President Kikwete for her work in food protection and mentoring of young people for the eradication of female genital mutilation. In 2012, Sister Germaine also marched on UNFPA Tanzania. She came with 2 colleagues and requested an appointment with UNFPA. And she asked us, "You are the UN agency mandated to end FGM. In my home district, 4,000 girls are at risk of mutilation this December. What exactly are you going to do about it?" And after that, a lot of fruitful things did happen, and to this date, UNFPA is collaborating with the Daughters of Charity there in Masanga village, and over 3,000 girls or so have been protected from FGM. Sister Germaine Baibika, karibu sana hapa New York, na asante sana kwa kazi yako.
Asante sana. I'm very happy, very good for this good occasion. Talking of traditional practitioners, FGM remains the most prevalent human rights violation in the world today and is deeply rooted in social norms and cultural practices governed by influential leaders. Our program, therefore, focused was, in the beginning, it wasn't easy to mobilize traditional elders to come to meetings or to dialogue on the issue of FGM. To them, there are many benefits and privileges associated with continuing FGM, including economic gains, access to better food, and they may have sex with very young girls after they are mutilated, etc. In our project, we therefore took a committee of 7. Sister Virginia, a Catholic nun of great experience, and her team trained this committee. Graced with very good preparation, this team, little by little, succeeded in great awareness and convicting the traditional elders to sit and talk about the need to eradicate FGM. Using your community-driven approach with discussion rooted in the Kura culture and its values, The project introduced alternative rites of passage to girls who attended training, an approach that celebrates the transition from childhood to womanhood without the harmful practice of mutilation. These celebrations were initially practiced with the Masanga safe house, but are now also promoted widely as an approach to eliminate FGM in the community as a whole. Talking about religious leaders, during his first pastoral visit, the Catholic Bishop of Musoma Diocese came to Masanga. The evening before his solemn mass, I spoke to him about the problem that was causing moral concern to many of the families the young girls and some families he has visited. And he, during his homily, spoke about this harmful practice. The way of us to raise awareness and the possibility of addressing the taboo subject in the Korea society. He also raised the issue at the Episcopal, and we began organizing seminars and trainings with different pastors of different churches where FGM was privileged. Through this collaboration approach with denominations, the program has successfully rescued and assisted a larger number of girls and their families in escaping from their community in their quest to abandon the practice. About the young people, awareness raising activities were organized in schools with the young people. We also prepared a safe house to protect and train girls who escaped the wrath of mutilators. Girls go to the safe house during the period of mutilation that takes 1 or 2 months. At the safe house, they receive formal education and life skills-based education that empower girls to how to take care of themselves. Self-awareness, hygiene, good manners, psychological support, etc. They also receive social counseling and health checkups. The girl receives her certificates and at the end of his training and has a big celebration. This is the alternative rite of passage. This celebration is a great occasion of sensitization as it brings together parents of the girls, the authorities of the Republic, traditional elders, NGOs, mutilators, and settlers. Some of the first challenges that we faced: limited and unsustainable funding makes it challenging to run the shelter for a larger number of survivors. We need medicine, beds from girls' periods, mattresses, funding for staff, run, etc. Groups of men, that is another challenge. Groups of men came to the safe house with machetes, spears, and knives and tried to destroy the camp and take all the girls for mutilation. Fortunately, they have never succeeded. Politicians encouraged FGM to gain votes during election years. Lack of alternative financial income generating opportunities for for families and incentives to allow girls to stay in school instead of this considered precursor to marriage and disability with a high blood price. What helps us to progress? Confidence in the active support and participation of the congregation, the active and significant support from UNFPA, the dynamic intervention of a psychologist, a counselor in the safe house, a good team of educators well trained for their work, and increase engagement and support from parents. Later on, we received support of traditional elders, the Republic of Tanzania, different NGOs and individual donors. They all accepted different organizations to serve girls and to fight GBVs and FGM through strengthened prevention and the response system by opening other safe houses.
Sister Germaine, asante sana. And thank you very much for all of it. And we wanted to highlight that this center in Tarime is one of a set of comprehensive actions that Tanzania has taken to end FGM. And it's worth noting that according to the last demographic and health survey, since FGM was criminalized in Tanzania, the prevalence has dropped by 50%. Dear participants, we are now in a panel discussion section of our program. And the first panelist that I have the pleasure of introducing is Shama Ulangis, and she's the youngest member of the Global Civil Society Reference Group of the UN and EU Spotlight Initiative, which is a regional initiative aimed at eliminating violence against women and girls. She's also the co-chair of Transform Education, which is a feminist coalition with a shared mission to accelerate progress for gender equality in education. Shama, I wanted to ask you, in your role as the coordinator of the Global Reference Group, how do you foresee the movement that's been created growing in size and momentum to end gender-based violence and FGM?
Sound check. Can I just, yeah, okay, thank you so much, Anna. Before everything, I just want to recognize I'm a little nervous. It's very difficult to follow Sister Germaine. All of the work that has been done in Tanzania and DRC is very, very important. Before I start talking about what are some of the things that the movement can and how the movement can grow in momentum, I just want to recognize the different types of barriers that the movement has been going against for a really long time. If you know the Association of Women in Development, or AWID, they've published a really, really comprehensive report of all of the anti-rights actors, the anti-rights movement that is really well funded, that has core funding, and has long-term funding of up to 50 years. All of this we are experiencing amidst pushback of all of the anti-reproductive rights organizations, global conflicts that are rising up everywhere in the world. And at the same time, that is in the backdrop of somehow, and this is already always being addressed, right? There's a bit of a lack of capacity in terms of how to engage with women's rights movements, a lack of understanding of how survivors movements also operate, which in turn is a problem with how we fund survivors movements, with how we fund grassroots movements at the same time. We all know that there is a lack of funding for grassroots movements, 1% of ODA, or I think 0.1% of ODA, I think I may be messing up the percentage, is given to grassroots organizations and women's rights organizations. And this lack of funding is also coupled with the lack of grace that is given to informal organizations. We are always given so many technical things that we have to follow all to the letter, where we spend months just complying to all of these. Whereas if you do a quick Google search, trillions have been spent on bailing out startups, but we can't somehow bail out young feminist organizations or emerging women's movements. Last 2019, there was a huge news that happened, right? I don't know if you're familiar with this, but the Spotlight initiative was given 500 million by the EU in order to end violence against women and girls. 26 countries, 5 years. Bit of a stretch, right? 500 million in order to end violence against women and girls. But we know that the Spotlight initiative is not, it's not perfect at all. But we have seen how comprehensive approaches are very important. Increased focus on prevention also happened when Spotlight was implemented, but also scaling of promising practices was also done. We've seen a coordination of UN agencies, and we want to see more. This was very, very difficult. I know that UN agencies can attest to this, but we want to see more coordination of UN agencies on ending violence against women and girls. And it has brought new actors, more grassroots organizations, sex worker rights organizations, up to the table in order to be able to influence governments and in order to be able to influence UN programming as well. Where we see strong intersectional, intergenerational movements, violence is easily addressed. Where there are feminists within the government, within UN agencies, within traditionally and culturally dominant institutions, we see violence prevented. And where women's rights organizations are well resourced, we see violence reduced. As of the moment, there's not necessarily a global women's rights organization or a global network that is focused specifically on the coordination or the coalition building of GBV and HPs or harmful practices with a very intersectional lens to it. We're all competing with each other with the little amount of money that we have, and we want to see more collaboration amongst all of these women's rights organizations that are working on EVOG, that are working on harmful practices. But how can we do that if there's not enough money for us to be able to access? Which means we need more money. Money and funding is an accelerator of the movement. Divesting from military spending in order to give that to women's rights for all of the countries that are represented here. Forgo the debts of small islands and all global majority countries as well is very important, and that has been one of the main calls that feminist organizations here at CSW have been pushing for. We're all pushing for greater accountability from states as the duty bearers of our rights. And we want to see programming that is based on human rights, that protects women human rights defenders, that acknowledges shared leadership with civil society organizations, that is a quality of programming that ethically scales and does not sacrifice quality for reach. And we want to see fit for purpose funding for grassroots organizations that is able to reach those who are hard to reach areas. I end there. I can see Anna standing already. Thank you so much for the time, and thank you so much for this space.
Thank you so much. And you do have another question at the end, so we still have an opportunity. Next, we have a speaker who I would refer to as the authority on all things religion in the UN, though she left us. She has left us now. But, Professor Azza Karam is currently the president of Lead Integrity. She is a member of the UN Secretary General High-Level Advisory Board on Effective Multilateralism. But before that, she was serving UNFPA and UNDP for over 20 years. And while she was with UNFPA, she co-founded and chaired the United Nations Interagency Task Force on Religion and Sustainable Development. Professor, I would like to ask you, how can we build deeper partnerships between faith actors and the United Nations system and all our other critical stakeholders?
How long have we got? Thank you. It's a great pleasure and a privilege and something very close to my heart to be here, and I want to pay tribute to all my UNFPA friends and colleagues, and most especially, of course, but definitely not only our Executive Director, Dr. Natalia Kanem, but just a big cheer and a big, great thank you for having me amongst you again. I have missed you all so much. I'm also incredibly impressed to hear of the different examples of success in this particularly painful field. I too am a survivor of FGM, and it's always been an issue deeply close to my heart, precisely because it's been a personal journey as well. I want to say three things. Deeper partnerships are not necessarily a luxury, they're an absolute necessity. We heard before from the very brilliant and eloquent presentation by Shama that there is a coordinated, global, multi-stakeholder, effectively alliance, extraordinarily well-resourced against women's rights and gender equality. And I think the challenge is to be able to see, as UNFPA has done so obviously, who the friends and allies are from within those movements. And I think we can see, thanks to Monsignor, the Archbishop, how important there is to find that common ground of principles that can then enable joint action, as we've also seen from the experience of the Sister Germaine. But we do have a problem, and the problem can be illustrated best, I believe, by an anecdote that I will share with you from a particularly high-level conversation that took place not so long ago, where the discussion was about the value of religion for the multilateral spaces. And one of the comments said by a very senior politician was, well, we don't really need to speak about religions, do we? After all, what will we do with all these Muslims and Jews? The point here is not so much that this even came across the mind of someone with such vast experience, but the point is that we tend to silo our efforts remarkably. So here we are discussing legitimately the incredible necessity of addressing FGM. But FGM is also part of a continuum of discriminatory attitudes and behaviors and mindsets that are rearing their ugly heads again. The discriminatory attitudes don't just focus on one aspect. They tend to be relatively well coordinated. So discrimination against my religious minorities is also part of right-wing extremism, political, national religious extremism. It's part of a continuum of discrimination that we are living at the height of. So yes, to deepen the partnerships, we need to make sure that we work multi-stakeholderly. We need to make sure that we're not just working on one issue, but we're learning lessons and harvesting the lessons of success from other movements. The feminist movement, the secular feminist movement, is an absolutely brilliant example, but it's also one which has been handicapped by the fact that they don't work with the multi-religious women's rights movements around the world. Imagine what a partnership that would be. And we have a challenge of A, addressing our own silos in the way that we engage, but B, also looking at how other examples from other kinds of discrimination have been very helpful. I have a small instance. The issues of success that we've heard come from the Christian communities. That is valuable, relevant, and necessary. But there are many other communities out there working extremely successfully, and we need to make sure that we can support the multi-religious women's movements to work with the secular women's movements on what, as Monsignor said, the common principles of dignity. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, participants. Just to let you know that the refreshments will be ready in about 15 minutes. Please don't leave at exactly past, please. But just to sort of listen to Aza's advice, our next speaker is Rosanna Issa, who is the Executive Director of Sisters in Islam. And Sisters in Islam is a Malaysian NGO working on women's rights within the framework of Islam. She joined the Malaysian women's rights movement in 1999 to address violence against women. Rosanna, I wanted to ask you, could you tell us how you bring the intersection of feminist movements and the Islamic faith together to address gender-based violence and FGM more particularly in Malaysia? And I'm sorry, Rosanna, but if you could keep it to about 2 minutes.
Wow. Thank you so much for
Thank you so much for having me here in 2 minutes. It's really going to be a challenge. I have to say that the work of Sisters in Islam, we locate ourselves in the belief that Islam supports equality between men and women. And I think 30 years ago, when we fought for the Domestic Violence Act, we came with this view. And I would like to thank also the feminist sisters, the Joint Action Group for Gender Equality, which now comprise 14 organizations of human rights, women's rights principles. They are the ones, they believe, they too, even though they are secular feminists, they believe that Islam upholds equality between men and women. And I think the strength of the work that we do comes from that common belief within the women's movement. I have to say that the work we do is very challenging. We have been dealing with a fatwa that we are deviants for subscribing to liberalism and religious pluralism. We're still in that court case right now, but I just want to bring news. Of course, you know, with these challenges, there are also neighboring countries, and I would like to point out what's happening in Indonesia, where 2017, they had created feminist groups, women ulama. They had created this group called the Kongres Ulama Perempuan Indonesia, the Women Ulama Congress. They have issued religious findings which have been accepted as fatwas by people on the ground. They have been able to address the issue of child marriages, and just in 2022, they had really tried to pin down on this issue of FGM and female circumcision by going to a strategy of really pinpointing down what FGM really is, which is the cutting and harming of female genitalia. And I think strategies like this, where you make specific the act in terms of the description of what is FGM and what is female circumcision, I think that is the way to get through the imagination of what the act really is. And I really would like to urge, you know, please look through the work that is being done by the Kongres Ulama Perempuan Indonesia, because in the wake of what we are dealing with the fatwa, we are also looking towards other movements and other countries for inspiration to keep us going. Thank you very much.
I think we can only wish you courage and thank you for walking the difficult walk for us. Our next speaker is Sami Abimbade from the Value Female Network. He is an SRHR advocate with 12 years of experience in community engagement and policy drafting, system strengthening. He is also the focal point for Inter-African Committee on Traditional Practices Affecting Health and Women of Girls in Nigeria. Sami, I want to ask you, how does the Value Female Network advance an agenda which is driven by young people for the benefit of young people, specifically on gender-based violence and FGM?
Thank you so very much. I want to thank UNFPA for having us share the amazing work Value Female Network Africa is doing in Africa. I also want to help and recognize head of states, head of agencies, partners, and fellow panelists. I'll start by helping highlight that the beauty of gender transformative approach is the demand it places on every organ of the program to help ensure that it's sustainable. And I'm going to start by helping share the story of one of the benefactors for adolescent bootcamp. The adolescent bootcamp is a prolifically bootcamp whereby we bring adolescent girls together And this adolescent boot camp, which has been funded by UNFPA for the past 7 years, that started with 30 girls in just one state in Nigeria, has been able to help transcend into helping ensure that it has reached 6,307 girls in 7 states in Nigeria. Now, but I quickly want to share the story of Rukayat Bello. Rukayat Bello is the daughter of a chief imam in a local government called Rigasa in northern Nigeria. And upon the engagement, upon the adolescent boot camp engagement, Rukayat felt the need to go back and first and foremost help ensure that she reached out to her peers. So she had to help reach out to other girls in the community that were not in the camp to help say that let's see how well we could actually address issues. Let's form a movement first and foremost. So this movement was formed, and it started place asking questions, asking religious leaders questions, asking traditional leaders questions. And this created an open platform for us to be able to get into the community, because traditional leaders, religious leaders started asking, what are you saying to our daughters? What are you helping inform them about? And one way or the other, they started challenging gender norms. These girls came up with a surveillance system at the community level. And with that surveillance system, they've been able to help ensure that they help stop at about 72 practices of female genital mutilation. Now that's a reflection, and that's just one of the many things that gender transformative approaches, like the adolescent bootcamp, can actually do. Now that program has gotten to a level whereby girls are now saying that we want to own the program ourselves. It's not, partners will help, I agree with me that it's becoming quite clear, the funding gap is getting widened, and we must help look at how well we could actually have community-owned initiatives. We must help see how well community can now start asking questions and start saying, irrespective of the support, how well can we drive initiative ourselves? And so we would know that community-based solutions reflect and is the mirror and mirrors that sustainable projects. So what we are saying here in essence is that these girls have gone to a level where now they've formed what we call a Girls Alliance to end harmful practices. Now what Value Female Network is doing, is one out of many things that young people are doing globally to help ensure that we zero down on gender-based violence and most prolifically female genital mutilation. Now I want to ask in this room, Excellencies, that can we just help picture? In 7 years we've been able to reach 6,307 girls. We intend to help ensure that we scale up to seven countries of the world before 2027 as we approach 2030. But can you help picture if you have 307 girls that are advocates and are leading advocacy at our different countries? Do we understand how magnanimous that would be? Do we know the results we'll be able to help achieve and cover? That's just to let you know that transformative approaches is one of the most sustainable ways to help ensure that we help zero down on gender-based violence on or before 2030. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sami. And you were talking about the power of young people. And so it's great that we have a young person, a particularly young person, with us. And she is Sierlavi Granali. And she's a member of the Girl Scouts of the Philippines, and she's one of the global advocacy champions. And you will have heard of Girl Scouts, but maybe you didn't know that Girl Scouts globally are doing tremendous law reform work. For example, in Malaysia, 4 districts have now bylaws on child marriage as a result of the advocacy work of WAS. In Malta, there's a law on FGM, since the Girl Scouts worked with the refugee populations on FGM, and so forth. It's a long list of excellent results. And without further ado, Sierlavi, I would like to request that you tell us a little bit about your advocacy journey and within specifically your organization.
Thank you. So good day, everyone. First of all, I'm very grateful for this opportunity to be here speaking, and to be one of the young people in this room is just, overwhelming and empowering at the same time. So I'm here representing and raising the voices of almost 9 million girls of the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts. And before I tell my story about how I got involved, or not exactly my story, A 2020 study reveals that in the southern part of the Philippines, from where I come from, 4 out of 5 female have undergone FGM. And it might not be as large as those in Africa, for instance, but the fact that it is happening is alarming. No girl deserves to have no right or to be deprived of her right to her own body. Now, what I want to tell you is that as a global movement, we take pride in our non-formal education method, in creating a learning environment where girls and young women like me can take the lead in issues that affect us. Briefly, we have the Stop the Violence campaign, which is a global campaign launched in 2011. And we have the Voices Against Violence curriculum, which is the educational program component of STV, which is in partnership with UN Women. And these initiatives are actually centered around prevention, because we believe in advocacy that is rooted in feminism and decolonialism, where we enable girls and young women like me to develop our advocacy projects ourselves. We don't have to wait for anyone or for anything. We can take on these issues ourselves. And that it emphasizes that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. But the most important thing that I want to share with you all today is the story of a girl who was affected by GBV and was empowered by WAGS. So I got her permission actually to share this story. One night, she was riding a public transport on her way home when she was seated beside a drunk man. Long story short, she experienced sexual harassment in public transport. And her friends asked her when she told that story, "What were you wearing?" But she told them that she was wearing a uniform because she was from school. And all the more that nobody in the public transport spoke out for her. Everybody saw it happen, but no one dared speak out for her. And all that she remembered was that people were telling her that, oh, because he was drunk, or that because he was under an influence. Now, in 2020, WAGS partnered with Avon Foundation to develop Together We Rise project in Argentina, South Africa, and in the Philippines. And she was one of the participants to that national advocacy training. But even before that, she was told that she was too young to speak out, that she was too young to raise her voice about something that concerns her. But she took this pivotal moment of having a training in her country to actually do something about it. So then, it was in 2020 when the pandemic happened. But she was among the leaders who launched a national advocacy project at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. One of her milestones was that she co-led an online 18-day campaign where they had various activities such as webinars, they had infographics, and they have online challenges to engage girls and young women at the comfort of their homes. But of course, they still experience challenges and limitations such as the access to internet. But this did not stop them. Because for her fight for gender equality knows no bounds. And that was a testament of how girls and young women like her could adapt to situations as long as they're empowered, as long as they're supported, and as long as they have the resources to take action. And if you ask me where she is right now, well, I've kind of gave it away earlier. She's right here, sitting actually, and speaking, having her voice heard at an international stage to tell her story and the story of other girls and young women like her. With the work that we have done, I think that how we frame the narrative of empowerment is just important. Because oftentimes, girls and young women like me are labeled, for the lack of a better term, as victims or vulnerable. And honestly, this is not empowering at all. We are not victims. We are not vulnerables. We are more than that. And that is something that is very important. how we frame the narrative, how we push for empowerment is just as important with supporting us in the work that we do. To conclude, FGM reflects deep-rooted gender inequality, and it constitutes an extreme form of discrimination against women. Now more than ever, we must remain united against the face of GBV and harmful practices, because it is perpetuated by a culture of acceptance and silence. We young people are here to help. This is an intergenerational and an intersectoral fight. That is why I'm here in the first place. In a panel where they are so experienced, I am just a young person, a girl, but not just because I am a girl. And sustainable investment in girls and women is not just about funding projects. It is investing in the connection and the power of this connection to elevate equality. Jane Goodall, a British primatologist, said that what you do makes difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make. So I say that we young people are here to make that difference that we want. And we want you with us in making that difference. Thank you.
Sir Lavi, thank you. And I am making the executive decision to call that the last remarks of the panel. Apologies, we've run out of time, so we don't have the additional question time. But before we go, and before we go for our refreshment buffet, I would like to request that the chief of our Gender and Human Rights Grants, Leila Sharif, comes and gives a vote of thanks to our participants.
Well, thank you all so very much, Excellencies, esteemed colleagues, dear friends. Alas, our time has come to an end together, and I stand between you and your lunch. But I'd like to thank the Honorable Minister, Ambassador, the Archbishop, Dr. Khanam, and all of our panelists, Sister Germaine, Shama, Dr. Karam, Rosanna, Sally, Sir Lovely. Thank you all so much for your time and for sharing your wisdom and your shared vision with us. And for all of you for sharing your time with us. It's very precious, and we don't take that lightly. And I just want to shout out to everyone online who stayed with us, who's also on Zoom. Thank you for joining us. This was really an important opportunity for us to share stories, inspire action, and really think of how we can end gender-based violence and harmful practices finally. We heard about the criticality of diverse partnerships at all levels. To scale up, most importantly, scale up. We know what works, and implement interventions that really work in communities. That's where it counts. The importance of innovation and adaptation, we also heard about. We heard about the importance of investment in women and girls and the approaches that we know will end violence and harmful practices. Above all, today was really another clarion call to action to redouble our efforts to prevent rollback of the hard-won gains made to keep women and girls safe from harm. We cannot rest until we turn the tide. Not when 2,000 girls a day are being cut. Not when 1 out of 3 women are still facing violence and abuse. The good news is, and we have to end on a positive note, I think, is that we know it works. We have the ambition, that is clear from everyone in this room and everyone who has spoken today. And we have the global community on our side. We know what it will take, and let's make history and make all of these different violence and discrimination history. Let's continue to work together, our collective efforts, keep our unwavering commitment to women and girls and everyone. Let us do this for the future of every 10-year-old girl. She is counting on us. And I leave you with a Zambian proverb. The rock that is in the middle of the sea does not fear the rain. Once again, thank you all so much to our esteemed panelists, to our guests, for your dedication, your fearlessness, and your commitment. And welcome again to UNFPA. We stand with you in this journey. Thank you so much.
you.